Joining me on Impact Catalyst is the executive director of Girls Rock, Jessie Miller. Welcome.
Hello. Thanks for having me, Joe.
Happy to see you. So let's dig in. For those that aren't familiar with Girls Rock, we have to do the proverbial 101 on the org.
So Girls Rock St. Pete is a grassroots local organization, and our mission is to empower girls, women, and gender expansive youth through fearless expression, mentorship, creating really encouraging, safe, supportive spaces. And it's a model that was actually developed about 15 years ago up in the Pacific Northwest. Now there's over 100 all over the globe. So we have sister cities in Japan and Sweden and South America. So it's a really beautiful movement, but each are very specific to their own local community.
Fearless expression sounds pretty awesome. So when you talk about building confidence, let's sort of deconstruct what are the elements of confidence and what are the biggest destroyers of confidence. I mean, obviously, everybody growing up they're new in the world, and there's a lot of media and now social media swirling around. So, what are sort of the building blocks of what hurts and what helps confidence in the modern world?
I'm so glad you asked. That's such a great question. So, boys and girls generally start in school with similar levels of confidence. And around middle school, the end of elementary school, the beginning of middle school, a lot of gender norms start to deteriorate a girl's sense of self-worth. And there's been a lot of studies on this, actually. It's called the gender confidence collapse. And it's a very well studied phenomenon that they used to think really started around puberty for girls and then was kind of, eradicated when you are actualized into adulthood. And what they're finding now is that is not the case. And that the gender confidence collapse that begins in puberty often follows women into adulthood. So think about negative self talk, rumination, harsh judgment of self and others, body dysmorphia, lack of a sense of belonging, isolation, depression, anxiety. All of these for women generally start to develop in that critical age that we focus on at our camp. And without having a very supportive environment, especially where girls can start to see each other as allies instead of competition, a lot of these really harmful habits stick with women all the way into adulthood. And the one comment I get so much from parents and volunteers is that this is the camp that they needed when they were kids. That girls have a supportive space where they can really deconstruct a lot of those harmful habits that they're learning, unlearn a lot of those harmful gender norms, and relearn the tools that build self-confidence. So to your question is what makes confidence, like really it's a pattern of getting out of your comfort zone, trying something new, taking risks, failing, and having the resilience to learn from that experience and keep going. So the rock band is a perfect little microcosm of practicing all of these great new tools like healthy communication, resilience, doing something where you're vulnerable because you're all learning new instruments. So really people think it's a bit of a misnomer. I think people hear Girls Rock St. Pete and think that we're like a school of rock, and we're not at all. So we're not here to build Taylor Swift, which, I mean, she's wonderful, but that's not what we're about here. So yeah, that's a great question.
That's an important distinction. So around that time, and then it seems with no official psychological training, that it would be a time where the visual elements of interaction become more important as, I guess, boys go through puberty, or the romantic elements of our bodies come to start to come to the forefront. And is it that people are just become more visually driven then, and so the judgments around your visual self take over a big portion of your life because of these changes? And then kind of following on, that's kind of interesting because rock bands are known for their visual, largeness, right? So, is it the idea that you recognize the role of the visual elements play and embrace it and own it, or is it you also, what portion of it is also diminishing it, saying that we need to push back against how visual the world has become, and we need to really focus on the things beyond visual?
Yeah, great question. So, wow, you've really done your homework, Joe. I can tell. Yeah. So I think that around that critical age that we're talking about, there's all sorts of things. There's the media that we're starting to pay attention to, and you're looking at how narrow the margin is for what we see as beautiful, and teaching girls the way that they're supposed to look. And it's incredibly harmful because girls at a younger and younger age are trying to adhere to this standard of beauty, which is not realistic and not healthy. So, that is a really important point. When girls start school, they're raising their hands, they're answering questions, they're participating in sports, they're doing all the same things that boys do. But when girls kind of reach puberty and there's a lot of modeling out there about how girls are supposed to act, and you start to see girls getting smaller. They don't want to raise their hand because if they say the wrong answer, it's really hard when you're losing self confidence to come back from that and to build that resilience. So, generally, what's happening is that girls, their presence, their interest in trying new things, they're trying to kind of follow the herd. You know what I mean? So, I think that the beautiful thing about our model is that we're intentionally developing spaces with a lot of specific supports in there where girls learn to take up that space and to use their voices and to be weird. I mean, our kids, like the first day, it's incredible to see how shy some of these kids are. And, 24 hours in, you can't get them to stop talking and singing and moving their bodies because they realize that they're in this super safe space. And what's interesting is around that gender confidence collapse that we were talking about, they did a study where they started interviewing women in generally high powered positions in industries dominated by men, so sports and technology, and women in high levels like CEOs, and kind of asked them kind of how they were able to navigate around that gender confidence gap. And what they found is that the majority of these women had been in situations growing up where they were at all girls schools or they participated heavily in all girls sports. They're finding that by them being able to be separated from the pressures of being around men and boys, and not necessarily from men and boys, but the pressures that girls put each other under in the presence of men and boys. And so when you're free from that, you get to develop a sense of confidence without that pressure. And so that was a really interesting study that happened, and this model actually came about in response to not only in the 90s, and I was living up in the Pacific Northwest at the time with the beginning of the Riot Girl movement. There were not a lot of if you were a woman in a band, usually you're getting asked like, "Oh, are you the merch person?" or "Who are you dating in the band?" And a lot of women in the punk rock scene in the beginning were just, humiliated on stage, and it wasn't a safe space for them. So not only was the girls rock model developed in response to that, the music scene, but also this gender confidence gap where we really wanted to make safe spaces for girls to, take up space, use their voice, and develop that confidence that's so important.
That's great. So, can you talk a little bit about how that expresses itself? So, if a girl signs up, she shows up for the sort of first gathering, what happens then?
Okay, so if you're in Girls Rock Camp, the model is it's a 6-day intensive summer camp is the model for Girls Rock St. Pete summer camp. And you'd start on a Monday. So Monday you come into camp and we teach keys, vocals, drums, guitar, bass, and
Or
drums.
triangle?
Drums and the triangle and the cowbell. And so you'd
Cowbell,
start,
that's the cowbell.
someone's got to play the cowbell.
Oops.
You'd start on Monday And it is very likely that you've never picked up your instrument before. Most of our campers have not. And that's a big question that I get a lot from parents. There's like, oh, my kid really isn't a musician. And it's like, great. We're all starting from square one. Our day at Girls Rock Camp is jam packed. Every minute of it is something fun is going on. But in the mornings, generally, you're going to go to, if you're playing drums, you will go to your drums class where there will be a professional teacher, usually two, and you've got, 7, 8 kids, each on their own drum set, learning drums together. It's wild. And then in the afternoon, you are assigned to a band, and with that band, you now have 5 days to write an original song together, in which you perform on the sixth day at Janus Live to, hundreds of people, like in a proper rock show. So it sounds impossible, but it works. And the magic of it is that you all are in this collective, you know, goal sharing space of like, wow, we don't even know how to play our instrument, and we're going to be writing an original song together and performing it in 5 days. Like, that sounds insane. And it doesn't need to be a banger, although we've had a lot of bangers from the Girls Rock Camp, just from the very first songs that they've written. But the point of it is it gives them that space to learn how to, if they're shy, it teaches them how to speak up and have their opinion shared. If they share a lot, it reminds them to take a step back and to be thoughtful of other people's ideas. And all those fun things that happen in a band when you're getting, and there's a lot of drama. There's always tears. Wednesday is the worst day. Something happens on Wednesday where everyone kind of collectively panics that, like, wow, we only have 2 more days and we don't have our song together. So we make sure that we have extra mental health counselors there on Wednesday because it's a doozy. So yeah, that model is replicated, like I said, all over the world. And we found that it really works. And I think some people you know, are apt to ask, how is a transformation like that happening in just 1 week? But what we find by surveying campers after the fact and the campers that come back is that these tools really stick with them, and it changes their perspective on their own capabilities and the way that they think of and talk to other girls. And so that's taken back into their homes, into their churches, into their schools. And we've really seen that just 1 week of Power Camp can really transform a whole girl's outlook on her own self-worth.
And I'm sure a lot of it's in them, and it just needs to be needs a way to get out there. And once it's out, then it's not
Definitely.
put it back. You're hitting the elements of building confidence sort of through this medium of music. What are there occasions when you have you directly talk about confidence, you directly talk about scenarios and situations, and get into the psychology of it? How much does that play into the process?
A lot. So there are obviously, this is a kids camp, so we have to make it super fun, and we have to make it safe, and we have to make it encouraging. So we have over 100 volunteers that work at camp, and our camp volunteers are all women identified, and we go through an orientation and a training, because a lot comes up in this week when girls are in a very safe space and we're talking about all body positivity, confidence, depression, all sorts of, kind of deep subjects. The girls end up sharing a lot about themselves, which is a really beautiful thing to see. And this past Girls Rock Camp, so we skipped 2 years of COVID. And then when we came back, which was last year, it was a very stark contrast. We have a talking good behind your back wall where girls are encouraged to write to each other and like really think about like, not just physical compliments or on their clothes, but like real character compliments or behavior type compliments. So to start actively looking for the positive in each other. And then we have activities where it's called the Iphelia, and you can anonymously put in things that are happening in your life in this box. So it's been anything from, my parents are getting a divorce, to we were homeless this past year and slept in our car, to I think that I might be gay, but I don't want to tell my parents. I mean, it's all sorts of things to, I get bullied at school. And then what we do is at the end of the day, we put all of those anonymous things that came in the box, all of those comments up on a board, and we go through them as a group one by one because we want kids to understand that they're not alone in these experiences that they're having. That many of the kids have been through a painful divorce of their parents, that many kids, are questioning their own sexual identity, that many kids are going through hardship. And by doing that exercise, and we have counselors there that we go through each of these topics, and we have a little share circle, and sometimes it gets incredibly emotional, but by building that trust and to help these girls understand that they're not alone, that sparks this idea that, like, wow, this is a safe space. There's really nothing that I can do that's going to turn these campers away from me or the counselors away from me. So that in of itself is a lot of the building confidence. You really start to have to, right on the very first day of camp, establish that sense of trust.
What a rare and powerful opportunity. And as the executive director, I'm assuming it attracts a lot of empathetic folks in the staff. I mean, what a roller coaster for them! How rewarding, and every week to go through this roller coaster of personalities and emotions and journeys, and hopefully a couple counselors set aside to counsel the counselors, because I'm sure that can be
that's a good point. We thought about this year. We're like, wow, we really need a counselor for the counselors, because last summer we put them through the ringer. I mean, they were working hard, and we're going to double up this summer on counselors because that intensive process, that emotional process, and then the demand of being vulnerable and working as a team is exhausting. And then for all the organizers that are putting this together, we're also exhausted. It's like this, you get depleted and you also get fueled. It's really a weird energy exchange, but the counselors and all of the volunteers are amazing. And I would say that this camp is just as much for the volunteers, honestly, as it is for the campers, because the experience of having that space, it's so much of what we didn't have when we were kids: the support, the permission, the belief the belief that we have in these kids. Like, we know that they can do this, and it seems impossible to them, but we're so confident. And, the other part of it is we just can't take ourselves too seriously. Like, us as counselors, like, there's no such thing as a wallflower. If we're doing a freak aerobics or a scream circle or a silly walk activity, you better believe all of the volunteers are up there making total dorks of themselves, because we have to show the kids that that's okay. And if we're feeling self-conscious, if we're feeling embarrassed, then they pick up on that so easily. And a lot of the women that volunteer have also never been in a safe space like that. So the therapy part of it is double.
Well, it's a very there's a lot of everything in there. Must be very
It's a lot.
intensely.
But I also want to mention, Joe,
sure,
that we have an amazing dude crew.
Yeah.
The best of men work on our dude crew. And the cool thing about the men is that they really play, it's like they are intentionally playing a supportive role to make spaces where the girls and the women can shine. So, only women identified and non-binary volunteers work at Camp Week, but all of the supportive roles, setting up our equipment, moving stuff, stage management, street team, website design, we have a lot of men that support us, because it's very important that boys and men are part of the conversation. We can't really make social change just with women and girls. So I think that by having the girls there, seeing their brothers, their dads, their friends invested in their success, is like just a beautiful and rare dynamic for them.
Yeah, agreed. That's the way to change will be diminishing, because obviously not all men. There's a spectrum of
Indeed.
and allying with the good end of the spectrum, now starts to segment out and reduce the size of the bad end of the spectrum. And I think that's an important part of the path to changing the world.
Indeed. Yeah. That was my pitch for you to be on our Dude Crew, Joe. So I can't wait for your application.
I've set up many a
I
stage.
bet. Yeah.
So I want to finish with a couple things. First, logistical. What's going on this summer? What's coming up? What can people plug into? And then after that, kind of what can we take away in our lessons and practices or things we might take away into our daily lives. To take some of the spirit of Girls Rock and let us apply it and living day to day and existing in the world. So let's hit the logistics first, and then we'll move on to the fun stuff.
Okay, that sounds great. So our Power Week of summer camp this summer will be July 17th through the 22nd, and it takes place at the Allendale Equity and Justice Center. Our camp does, and then all of the bands write their original song, and then they'll perform it at Janice Live on Saturday, July 22nd. Believe it's 6 to 9, and it's such a fun show. We have we call it the Not So Silent auction, and we'll have other performers and local bands that open up for our camper bands. And we'll have vendors and shirts and food and all of that. And it's crafts, it's family friendly. So we hope that everyone in the community comes out to support the girls. And it's just the most beautiful thing to see them get out there on stage. And when they hear the crowd yelling for them, they just light up. So the girls that on the very first day that, are too shy to even say their name in circle by the end of it are up there just rocking out. So it's a really beautiful experience for everyone to come out. That's Saturday, July 22nd. And then we're also launching a Legends program for intergenerational bands. So we're hoping to get women out in the community who would like to join. It's kind of an adult girls rock camp. So it's a 6-week program on Saturdays, and youth and adults will be learning together because we really want to expand into year-round programming and after-school programming. So we're really excited about that. And let's see, we've got a bunch of shows coming up. We have our show camp band called Anarkitty, and they'll be performing at Pride this year. So they'll be at the Family Day, and they'll be at Janice Live for the Friday night concert, and also performing at the parades. On our website, there's just we have a lot of events coming up right now. So yeah, that's kind of the logistics of what's happening. And we're also right now we are recruiting volunteers. And I just would like to say that you do not have to be a musician to volunteer for Girls Rock Camp. Pretty much no matter what your skill set is, there's a spot for you. So we need everything from, snack fairies to counselors to nurses to photographers to social media people. We're always bringing in new folks and new skills to expand the reach of Girls Rock. So that's the logistics end.
And the website is girlsrockstpete.org.
Correct. Yes.
We'll put that magically on the bottom.
Yeah.
All right. Some sort of thinking we can do or some practices we can take into our daily life to, in our own mini way, accomplish some of the confidence building.
Well, I love that. That's a really great question. One thing I think is fun to try, and I do try to do this, although being around Girls Rock Camp is a great reminder, is to really look for the good in others. And sometimes I think in our lives, especially now with things being so divisive, it's easy to see people in black and white. And that talking good behind your back is really a way to start to cultivate some positivity around people that maybe we don't agree with. So in the small things, and I have a tendency to get very laser focused on things that I want to see change in the world. And sometimes I realize that I really have to cultivate that gratitude and start to see positive things so that, as a culture that we can find some cohesion just in the gratitude and the positivity. I do tell everyone that will listen, because I think that this is really important, is that when we talk about girls rock and rock and roll, I'd like to ask people who they think invented rock and roll. So I'm going to ask you, Joe, just for fun. If you had to guess.
Who invented it?
Of course, this is a trick question.
Chuck Berry.
Okay, perfect. Okay, Chuck Berry. Chuck Berry is a very common answer I get. Also Elvis Presley, And all of these guys actually got their sound from a woman named Sister Rosetta Tharpe, who came from the gospel tradition. And she was really the first person to, amplify, plug in her, what was a jazz guitar, and start making these rock sounds, which became really the sound that she used. She kind of melded gospel and blues and developed this rock and roll sound. And guys like Elvis and Chuck Berry heard that and started to riff on it and develop their own kind of twist on rock and roll. So I love to tell people that rock and roll was actually, if we're going to give credit to one human being, I love to give credit to Sister Rosetta Tharpe, who was a Black queer woman raised in the church and the gospel tradition. So that's a fun fact to pass around to someone.
Sister Rosetta Tharpe.
That's right. That's right.
T-H-A-R-P. Cool.
Yes. Yeah. So we pay tribute to her.
Start
She's an
watching Jeopardy
icon.
again.
Yeah. She actually had, she was played by Yola in a film recently, the Elvis film. So for those people who have seen the Elvis film, there is a small part of Sister Rosetta Tharpe in there, which is probably the most claim to fame she's ever gotten. So I like to pass that around.
Wonderful. Well, thank you for sharing.
Thanks so much for your time and your excellent questions, Joe. What a great interviewer you are.
Oh, thanks. Well, yeah, just such important work, and it sounds powerful. It really does. I mean, just to be a fly on the wall in some of those transformational conversations, and the power of a group of people coming together and having that path to let things out and connect over other people who have gone through the same things, and to circulate that really rare information and validation of experiences is. Yeah, it's just there's just not places in the world where that happens. So it's really, really, really cool. So I appreciate you sharing that.
Thanks for your time, Joe, and thanks for the support of Catalyst. You guys do so much for their community. We really appreciate it.
Sure, it's our pleasure.
Yeah, awesome.
Jesse Miller.
All right, Joe Hamilton, Dude Crew member. Can't wait.
Dude Crew training.